Um, I think that's sort of part of the problem that we're having now is that even a question like that, it sort of makes no sense because we live in such a diverse world, and the problem is not that we don't have one leader to unify the world, it's that we need to have many leaders representing the many different people and being able to coexist in peace. So I think, yeah, I think it would be a tragedy if we had one president of the world, but I think it would be good if we had a lot of leaders who could communicate with each other, you know. So. I think that, I mean, it depends on, you know, I think different people, what they consider as being part of the world is different, you know. I really don't think there is such a thing as any kind of a united communication between humanity at all right now. So I think there's the Western world, the Eastern world, there's the totalitarians, there's the Democrats, there's and it's just I really think there's actually a lack of communication, and and the world is ruled by itself, and that's what actually we're seeing because of all the environmental, you know, as much as we think we can harness and rule the world, the environment is now just changing so drastically all the time, and I think the world is ruling itself, and we just have to be careful because at the rate that the world is starting to rule itself because of how we've treated it for the past long while, it might kick us out. So yeah, the world rules itself. Well, revolution is a really interesting like topic because, you know, it's important to not be passive and not let things happen. If you see that something is going wrong, you should be able to kind of turn it around, you know, if something's going drastically off course. But I don't know if revolution is ever the way to do that, because I was reading these lectures by Stravinsky, and it really blew my mind because he said, well, a revolution, you have to remember that a revolution is a closed curve. So in the true sense of the actual word, it's you come all the way around. That's a full revolution, is you go exactly back to where you started. So I think it's typical human stuff to try and make a revolution because we just want to fix the problem like right away. We want one drastic thing, and revolutions are very bloody, they're very messy, and usually at the moment that the oppressed overthrow the oppressor, right away the oppressed become the oppressor and the next oppressed, you know, exists. So I think that better than a revolution, I don't think, oh, that's okay. Oh, that's all right. So I think rather than having a revolution, I don't think anything could have me start a revolution, but I think rather than treating it like that, we should just gently steer things into a proper course so we don't accidentally revolve all the way and start at the same point that it's been. So like, you know how, you know, like in chiropractic or something, if somebody has really severe curve in their spine, you don't just, if you go really rough, then you'll just break the spine, you know, because it's just so used to being in that spot. But if you work over many years and you just gently, you know, gently manipulate it and then strengthen the muscles around it to change the habits and everything, then you actually can achieve, you know, in 5 years the person could be standing straight up. And so I think that that's sort of the way to treat our social and economical and socioeconomical and everything should be treated gently and not, you know, revolution's the short way out. It's bloody and messy. So I think. Well, I think that absolute power, is never good. I mean, we learned that from The Godfather, but I mean, there is something to in our current situation, dictator, I think, is always negative. I know that the actual like in ancient Rome, they had dictators too, but they were allowed to come in only at the time of crisis and manage it. And then there was, I guess, in a time of crisis, if dictator at its original, like ancient Roman way, would be used, then it's just somebody to unite everybody in the time of crisis, but that person doesn't have an indefinite term. It ends once the crisis is averted or the problem is done. And so, I think that in some ways, if we could just have the environment, like if we keep on going into a horrible state, and then every other day there's tornadoes and floods, then we might need one voice to actually just alter how everybody does things. But then that person would not be able to stay on indefinitely the way a dictator does for 30 years or 50 years ruling with an iron fist. They would just come in as the voice during a crisis, and then once it was done, they would go back to a more checks and balances kind of rule. I definitely think it's very important to vote. It's like saying, well, why bother to pray? It's like a lot of it is for yourself, and a lot of it is internal. You need to feel like you have a chance to look at all the options and choose, even if it is as depressing as the lesser of the evils. You get to still assert yourself, and it's more for yourself to feel that you are being represented. I think it's a very sad state when people, it's like in that, in the movie, it really hit me when I was watching An Inconvenient Truth, and it had that sentence of going from denial to despair. And I realized that I've done that with voting, and I think a lot of people do that with voting, because, you go from ignorance to sort of the realization of how bought and how, incredibly, rigged a lot of the system is, and then you go right to despair, and then you just don't make yourself part of it, because you say, well, what can I do? And I think in those ways it's very, very important. It's very important to vote, because it's a message to yourself that you have. And I think that if people vote, they, once people become politically active and they vote, it just sort of breeds other ways of being active. So people that vote are more likely to organize a protest, or more likely to raise money for a charity. I think it's one of those things. It's a message to yourself. No, I don't think so at all. I mean, there are definitely, I think that kind of thing is just more of has to do with who you're brought up by, what your family situation is, what your nature is. I mean, that stuff is way too subjective to be part of the sex wars, So I think that both can be very democratic or very none, No, I think that nothing is good for everyone. That's the whole problem that we're facing in the world, is that people, for a long time, I think the reason why we are where we are, just in our situation of the human history, like the amount of wars we've had, and the amount of, pain and suffering that, different nations inflicted on other nations, and even civil wars, and wars with the world, with nature and the environment, is because people are after that one thing that is good for everybody, because they think that there is such a thing, and there isn't. And so, you know, democracy has its victims, just like a lot of other things. It's just, I think that as far as the systems that we've tried out, it's there is no perfect democracy, I think, anywhere, but it's closer to get to a perfect democracy than to like perfect socialism or communism, as we've seen. I mean, at least people come closer to a true democracy than any of those things. But it has its victims, and I think that we shouldn't just settle on one way of being. People should keep searching for the right way, and look into history and look into a lot of you know, just how other, even just, you know, we're so condescending to the rest of nature. We don't look at, you know, other animals and plants and see how they live in harmony. And, you know, I think there's other ways than just democracy, but I think the democratic way is safer as far as all of the human, you know, other structures are. Climate change, I don't know. I mean, I really have no answer for that, I think, because it's very hard to know what, if anything, can solve it. Again, like I said, I don't believe in revolutions, but I don't know if we can go, I don't know how much we can achieve by going gently. So it's actually, that's a huge question on my mind, because I don't know what or how can solve the, you know, and climate change makes it sound so gentle. It's really not. It's, you know, it's climate crisis, you know, and I don't know what can solve that. I don't think any specific system can. I think it has to do with people. It doesn't matter whether, you know, it's democratic or any sort of religion, or it's based on individuals somehow through years of being taught to forget their surroundings, reconnecting to them and somehow finding a way just through a collective, I don't know, collective unconscious. There has to be some way for people to get back in touch with how the rest of the world lives and solve it. I don't necessarily think it would be any political system or religious system that would do it.